Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This is eyeshadow palette month, and today we're going to be discussing my top 10 favorite grungy eyeshadow palettes. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is another installment in my daily video series that I'm doing this year for eyeshadow palette month, and the topic of today is going to be grunge eyeshadow palettes. So color stories like this. I happen to have one of these color stories on my eyes today, and some of these I've raved about in the past so many times. Some of these are discontinued, some of them you can still get. Let's just get to it. Before we get into the video, I would love to tell you a little bit more about the channel, just in case you're new here and you've never seen one of my videos. My name is Micah. I've been a content creator for more than a decade, and I have fair skin with a cool neutral undertone. I love eyeshadow palettes, so you can expect regular content with that, even outside of this special series that I'm doing. So if you'd like to consider subscribing and stay tuned for more. So in today's video, I have 10 grunge eyeshadow palettes. I will make sure to have any links in the description box down below to reviews, swatches, looks I've done, as well as any links for you to purchase these palettes with, if they are still available. If you do click one of those links and you shop through them, I could make a small commission. Just a quick heads up. 10 eyeshadow palettes, but I snuck in 2 as honorable mentions because I was like, yeah, they're kind of grungy too, and so I do need to mention them, I feel, and therefore I wanted to just include them here real quickly. And the first thing I need to include as an honorable mention is what's on my eyes today. I don't know how this will wear yet, so I cannot recommend it in terms of a really good palette, because this is the first time I'm trying Klarity Cosmetics, and this is their Deadly Rose palette that was released, I think, for Valentine's Day this year. I picked it up on MONOLITH, and I'm currently still having a code, so if you want to get 5% off of your entire order, you can check that out in the description box, and I will put it here as well. That's where I picked up this palette anyways, and the Deadly Rose palette is one that looks very grungy, very, very much so. I've used all 9 shades in this palette to create this look today. Of course, the red is what stands out instantly. I use this to deepen things up. This is on the lower lash line. This is sort of like that shimmery bit that's in this hollow that I have here. And then this is in the crease, and this is in the inner corner, and this I use to blend everything out and make it look seamless. So 9 shades in the palette, really pretty so far. I did struggle with fallout with this quite a bit. You really need to tap off your brushes with this palette, especially that darker taupe shade that I used to deepen things up with. The minute I stuck a brush in, everything in the pen started to crumble. So I was a bit nervous about that one. But yeah, it does seem to wear okay. I've only been wearing it for a few hours as I'm sitting here filming. So of course I'm going to be reviewing this palette for you in July. So please go back to my July eyeshadow palette review video if you wanted to see the swatches and this look a little bit more close up, and you want to hear all of my thoughts, because I haven't, I'm still working on testing this out and see how it wears. But the application was okay, a little bit more difficult to use than some other things I'm used to, but with these dark shades you always have to be very careful with fallout anyway, so I didn't really mind that. So it's very pretty. I just hope this wears really well, because I'm filming a bunch of videos today, so I hope it stays looking nice. But yeah, Deadly Roses is an honorable mention for my favorite grunge toned eyeshadow palettes, because that's the reason why I wanted to try it, because it looked like a really good grungy eyeshadow palette. And another one that I have to tell you about is this guy, because this is in my giveaway currently. So if you haven't entered yet, please make sure you do. I'll have the link in the description box down below to go to my announcement video, because there you can find all the instructions on how you can win this. And I definitely think it is a good grungy tone palette. Is it as grungy as some of the other things in this video today? Not quite, which is why it's an honorable mention. I love the packaging of this one, day to night. And then in here we get what I like to think of as a great grunge eyeshadow palette for fair skin, because things that are this dark can be difficult to use if you do have a fair skin tone. But it works every single time. You do get those really nice rich tealy greens here as well. Some gold things, some more green over here. You get those neutrals over there. It's got cool tones, but it's not super cool, so it's quite neutral as well. And this just goes to show that just because things aren't super duper deep, dark, and intense, you can still make a very impactful, more grunge heavy look. And that definitely is down to the different shades they put in here, I find. So this is a really beautiful palette. This is a really beautiful palette. It's currently unavailable, but it is going to come back this fall for Halloween time. They have already announced, but I happen to get an extra one, which is why it's in the giveaway. So if you want to receive it earlier, well, I definitely think, because the giveaway is open all month, so you can still enter for about a week or so. But yeah, you can win this right now if you want to. We're kicking off the official top 10 with, I think, the original grunge color story, at least in my brain, and it's the ABH Subculture. And Subculture is still, till this day, one of my favorite palettes in my entire makeup collection. I love it in the fall time, and I love it with multi-chromes. I've mentioned this many times. If you still happen to have this lying about, try it. Try it with a multi-chrome. Trust me on this. You're gonna love it. It's dark. It's got like almost like a semi-jewel tone kind of color story, which is why I didn't put this in the jewel tone category this time around, because I definitely feel there are other things I have that are more perfect as jewel tones by now, but this with a jewel tone multi-chrome, like, you know, the ones with the deep base with like the green, blue, gold flips, stunning. Really, really stunning, especially if you wear it with these two shades, or perhaps these like murky purpley things are really, really good with the kind of multi-chromes that shift from like green to red. So pretty. It's so, so pretty. So this, yes, it's an old palette. Yes, it's discontinued, but I still love mine till this day. And I just wanted to rave about it again. This next palette is really, really good in terms of grunge, but it's very much discontinued as well, and even the brand is defunct, I think. This is Michel Lou Cosmetics, and this is the Witchcraft palette. This is one of the most unique palettes in my collection, and again, I just wanted to have another opportunity to rave about this one. I mean, can it get any more grunge than this? Anyone tell me. It has those really nice, rich, earthy tones in here, combined with the dark greens and then these murky purples. And this magic shade is magic on the lids, let me tell you. So if you don't have this, I do apologize, but I still really love mine, and I really wanted to mention it here. Let's talk about something you can still get, because there are plenty of grungy eyeshadow palettes on the market today. And again, an older palette that I think hits the mark when it comes to the grungy tones is the Gemini Original, which I hope they still do. I'm not very clued into how much is still available for Melt, because they have been discontinuing things, but Melt, oh, so pretty, so stunning. The greens in here especially, but these like warmer, murky browny yellow things, especially if you combine them with the greens. Like, make sure, like, because of the black in the middle, I feel like not a lot of people like bridge the gap between the two, and they either use the greens or the grungy tones, but like they mix together so well. And this black is amazing as well. So if you want to go super dark and heavy-handed with it, you definitely can. So Melt Gemini is definitely another original grunge toned color story that is deep, dark, sultry, mysterious, and that's what I want in my grunge toned eyeshadow palettes. A fairly recent one that came out in the last year, I mean, what's in a name? Huda Beauty's Pretty Grunge, because grunge tones don't have to be greens and like jewel tone leaning color stories. Grungy tones can be neutrals too. This palette shows it very much so. And this I definitely think is a little bit more grungy. It's not as dark as I had expected it to be. Like in the pan, I feel this looks so dark, but that's because it's got a black background. So I feel the black background really influences what these shades look like to the eye. But here, for instance, it's very light, very light, very light, very light, very light. The only thing I have, there's only really one issue I have with this, that there aren't a lot of light shimmers in it. It's very mid-tone heavy when it comes to shimmers. This is the only thing I can use as an inner corner highlight, for instance. That's a bit of a shame, but it's definitely very workable, grungy, really pretty. For some people, this may be too warm-toned, but in my brain, it's really only this corner here that has some warmth. Everything else is like a cooler toned purple leaning shade, and therefore I just really love it. It does have one cream in, don't love that, but you could use it as a creamy base to sort of layer the powders on top to make it even darker and more sultry than it already is. And if we're talking grungy tones, a palette that is actually really similar to what I'm wearing today, so you definitely don't need the Klarity, but the Glamlite Chucky palette, this is the Crazy in Love, and it, like this, and it looks, again, super dark and saturated in the palette, which made me hold off of getting this originally. But I ended up biting the bullet because I fell in love with another palette by Glamlite earlier in the year. I was like, right, this seals the deal for me. I need to try the Chucky palette. And so many people in my comments were saying, oh, you're not going to like it. It's super dark. You probably won't love it. But I did. And the reason why I did is because as dark as this looks, I still get the shades I need to have as a crease shade. This purple works in the crease. This reddish tone works in the crease. This gray works in the crease. And as long as I have a light enough shade for my crease, I can make pretty much anything work, at least I feel. I mean, I don't mind something dark and sultry. If I'm in the mood for that, I really love it on myself. And the undertones of these things, it's not as red, I feel, as this is. Like, this is more of like a true red. These are like wine colors. Wine. And like slightly cranberry-ish here. But this, like this, it's like a good, deep, dark red wine. And I just love it. And then it's got some grays and those like plummy shades. And it's so rich and just, And if you have darker skin, this is going to look lovely on you as well. I'm pretty sure this is going to work really well for deeper skin tones. I showed you the subculture in this video, but guess what? There are so many brands that do that sort of vibe that are a little bit more current, that are still available to you. Fantasy Cosmetica de Druid is one of them. And to be quite fair, I like this a lot. It gives you the same sort of mattes as the ABH does, like this and this. It even has that like coppery shimmer that we also have in the ABH, but this does something that the ABH doesn't do. It's got multi-chromes. Well, duochromes really. Like all three of these shades here are, and this one as well, by the way, like 5 shimmers, and all of them have a little bit more interest to it. So for me, this does what I normally do with the subculture and adding multi-chromes, but it gives me 9 shades and it does it all in one go. And it's still available. And it's an excellent formula because Fantasy Cosmetica, really stunning formula. I still have the old packaging. I have to say, I really appreciate the new packaging they have with that stained glass vibe it has. So pretty, so stunning. And for an indie brand, we've seen quite a lot of indie brands upping their prices because they're doing really big palettes with a lot of interesting shimmers in, so that ups the price point. But they keep it quite manageable by having these smaller 9 to 12 pans. That means you do pay more for each shadow per pan, but I think for a lot of people, spending 40-45 euros on a palette is a lot more manageable for like a single purchase than 100 euros, for instance. So the Fantasy Cosmetica Druid, I think, is a great grunge tone. And like Melt, I think there is one brand that does grunge tones so well, and it's Shroud. Shroud Cosmetics has some really good grunge toned color stories. They really excel at this, and I think the Moonfall it's just one of the grungiest, yummiest, like saturated color stories on the market. This is really stunning. You get some like green tones, some blue things, and like some reddish purple things I would categorize it as. Mine is a little dirty because this shade shattered upon arrival and I salvaged it and it's fine. But that does mean there's like specks of green everywhere. The only gripe I have with this is, and that is something I have found with a lot of Shroud Cosmetics, is that the undertones within the palette don't really match. So I feel I always have to combine some of the palettes I have by them to create a full look. That's the only downside. But maybe if you are a lot better at color theory than I am, then maybe you can make it work. Or maybe if you just stick to the shades that look the most alike, then you're fine. But I like mixing and matching things and like contrasting things. And I feel this palette isn't great for that. But in terms of grunge, this definitely ticks all of the boxes. It's dark, it's grungy, it's yummy, it's got beautiful shimmers. It's stunning. I also wanted to include some things that are a little bit, like not a true neutral, like the pretty grunges, but that definitely have that more neutral vibe, but that can still give you a grungy look. And I've very often mentioned this palette as being one of the more perfect grunge toned color stories, but without it being overly so. It's the Enchanted from Sigma, in case you're unfamiliar with the palette. And the thing you need to do with this is you need to disregard all of these shades. And then I think you can see how it sort of changes the palette. So I've always mentioned how I wish this was an 8-pan, because those are the 8 shades I reach for. I don't always reach for these, even though they go really well with what the rest of the palette has to offer, because you can do something very warm toned with this. This gold goes really well with some of the greens we have in here. The purpley shades go really well with something like this, for instance. So there is a lot that it complements, but I feel it takes away from the grungy vibes. And that's the thing I appreciate about this palette. So if you stick to just the one half of the palette, this can be a perfect grunge, really nice saturated look for sure. But there are things that take away from it if you look at the other half of the palette. So it depends on what you want to look for. Next up is the Jewels and Gem from Odin's Eye. I think this is also a good color story for people who want something more neutral, but who still want the grunge. And I've mentioned many times how I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Odin's Eye by now, because their shimmers in these newer releases haven't been great for me in terms of how they apply with brushes. They work really well with fingers, so if you don't mind using your fingers with these eyeshadow palettes, you can probably make it work. And I do think that Odin's Eye does some really interesting color stories, and the Jewels and Gem is a really nice one, especially with these like cool tones in the middle, these darker saturated shimmers that it has. I think this is really, really nice if you want something that's a little bit more grunge leaning and you want to dip your toe into it, but you don't want to fully commit to something as intense as this. And finally, we need to mention this guy, the Melt Muerte, because even though it's been discontinued, it has been brought back so many times that by now it's like, I think everybody in the makeup community owns this. But I think this is another like grunge leaning color story, again with the reds. There's just something with me and reds and thinking that's automatically like grungy. I don't know about you, but I feel that way. This does have the brighter pops of color here, but especially this middle bit. It's so deep and dark and yummy. And therefore the Muerte is still on the list as one of my favorite grunge eyeshadow palettes. It doesn't get any more grunge than this. So I hope they bring it back if you don't have it yet. But as I mentioned, I doubt there will be many people who don't own this. So those were all of the eyeshadow palettes I wanted to mention in today's video, my top 10 grunge eyeshadow palettes. Let me know in a comment down below what your favorites are. I would love to know. And don't forget that I have all the links in the description box down below in case you want to see more content, because that way I can keep everything in one place and it's a lot easier for you to find than me dispersing it over tons of different videos. So yeah, I will be back with a new video again tomorrow, so if you'd like to stay tuned for that, and then I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye!